What's up everyone, my name is Ethan, welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Most of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed, and that's something that I would like to change. So if you have been watching the channel for a while and you are not subscribed already, please consider doing so. It would really help me out a lot. With that out of the way, let's talk about my favorite NBA draft classes out of everybody in the league. I picked up 5 teams that I think had not necessarily the best draft class, but my favorite draft classes, right? Because I'm not going to be one to judge all these players, the instant that they come into the league. I'm a big proponent of taking time and waiting to see where these guys are at in 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, before we can really make a sound judgment on how this draft class went for certain teams, just because players take a long time to develop and things change, of course, and trades happen and all that. So I think I want to just talk about my favorite draft classes based on my evaluations of the players in college and who I felt like did the most with the resources that they had in this class, and who just made the best value picks for where they were at, and ultimately which teams ended up with some of my favorite players in this class, and players that fit with their team as well. So let's get into it with my 5 favorite NBA draft classes. Let's start this off with the Los Angeles Clippers, who came out with 3 players, had to make a couple of trades, moved around a little bit, but ultimately they end up with these 3 guys, and that is Keon Johnson, Jason Preston, and BJ Boston. All 3 of those guys I think can be contributors right away, while also, preparing for the future and kind of setting the Clippers up to have these players grow and develop and become really good for them in 3 or 4 seasons, right? All these guys are a good combination of raw enough, with enough upside to be able to actually give them some minutes in their rookie season. So Keon Johnson is a guy who his measurables were off the chart. He had, I think, the highest vertical jump ever recorded at the NBA Combine. He's just super bouncy, really athletic, can get up there and dunk from anywhere on the floor. And so he gives them, another option there as a really athletic, guard forward type of player that can catch lobs and adds sort of that other dimension to their offense. He is a very raw player. It's going to take him some time to fully realize his potential, but I think just on his raw athleticism alone, he can contribute in his rookie season, especially with Kawhi Leonard going to be missing most of the year. That could free up some more minutes for him as well. And given that this team is not working with a ton, salary cap wise, they're kind of right up against it, of course. They're not going to be able to sign, free agents other than to minimum deals. I think adding a guy like him in the draft is going to help them be able to, still stay competitive this year, even without Kawhi. Jason Preston is also a really, another good guy. I thought that he was good value for them there at the 33rd overall pick. He was sort of graded as maybe a late first, early second round prospect, and that's where he ends up going. But I just think that he is a guy who kind of came out of nowhere, right? We know his story of posting his own highlights to social media and then ending up being an NBA draft player. And so Jason Preston is, a scoring guard and also a facilitating point guard, right? That's the scouting report on him, is that he's a traditional guard and he's able to sort of get the offense going. I like him. He's still obviously very young, but I think he can also contribute right away to this Clippers team, and they were able to, get some good value there in the early second round. And then BJ Boston is also, sort of a swing for the fences type player. He was going into college was regarded as, a potential lottery pick. He was going to be a guy who was really highly regarded after one college season, but he ended up not being very good in college, and his stock fell quite a bit. But ultimately, the Clippers get to add him here, late in the second round, a low risk type pick. You're not losing much by spending the 51st pick on Brandon Boston, and if he ends up being really good, then you just got a super nice player who's able to contribute for you for a very long time. So if he doesn't pan out, then that's okay, right? He's not supposed to. He's the 51st pick, but if he does, then you got a really nice prospect. So the Clippers adding these 3 guys onto their roster, I think, is the perfect mix of guys who can potentially pop right away and also being good in a couple of seasons, and that's why I really like what they did. So here's the Charlotte Hornets. This is the next draft class that I really loved. I was mad at the Hornets for a little bit because they passed on Kai Jones at number 11, and I made I was doing sort of my predictions for where each player is going to go in the draft. And when I was talking about Kai Jones, I was kind of saying, I would be mad if the Hornets don't draft him. And they end up passing on him at number 11. I think it was for good reason, because James Bouknight ended up falling to them. And given that he was graded to go 6th, 7th, top 10-ish type player, him falling down to 11th, sliding a couple of spots, was pretty good value for them there. But I think obviously they wanted Kai Jones because they ended up getting him. They ended up making a trade to get him at number 19, giving up, I think, a future protected first-round pick to do so, going to the New York Knicks. So they do get Kai Jones and James Bouknight there, both in the the first round, and I think those are both great fits for this team. Bouknight is a high-flying scoring guard. His shooting numbers were really, really good at the combine and stuff like that, and he seems like he's going to be just a score-first guard, which is an interesting fit on a team that already has, of course, LaMelo Ball. Now, we know that he's not only a scorer, he's also a really great passer and stuff, but LaMelo is going to be a superstar, so adding James Bouknight there as well, and then you have restricted free agents Devontae Graham and Malik Monk, and a lot of other guards in this roster as well, Terry Rozier. So there's, it's going to be kind of a logjam at that guard position. I think they might need to make some moves on a couple of guys, but Bouknight is potentially some huge upside for the future, and I like that pick there for 11. Kai Jones, I love his fit in Charlotte. I think it makes perfect sense to him be, a rim-rolling lob partner for LaMelo Ball. They needed a big man. They needed the size, they needed all that stuff. He made a trade for Mason Plumlee prior to the draft, and he is a veteran mentor type thing that can help Kai Jones along a little bit. Maybe I would assume that Plumlee would start, be the starter to begin the season, and then maybe Kai Jones can earn the job as the year goes along. But I just like his fit next to LaMelo and everybody else on this roster. The Hornets are going to be a crazy fun offensive team. They have a ton of guys who can score from everywhere on the floor, and now that they have this size as well, I think that helps them out a lot. JT Thor is a guy who can potentially develop. He's a raw prospect. I would not expect him to play much in his rookie season, which is okay. Getting him early second round is good value. The 37th pick I think is great value for JT Thor. A lot of people had a mid first round grade on him, but he ends up slipping a little bit, and that's fine because like I said, I don't expect him to play much his rookie year. And in 2 or 3 years, if he develops into anything, I think that that could be considered a real steal for him because he's a guy with high potential, just might not be good right away. And given all the young talent the Hornets already have, they don't necessarily need him to contribute right away in his rookie season. And then Scotty Lewis, with the 56th pick, I don't have much to say on him. I didn't really, look too much into his game specifically, but if he ends up panning out, it's fine. If not, it was the 56th pick, who cares? Here's the Orlando Magic. This is a different one compared to everything else that I have on my list because this is the thinnest draft class out of all of them. They only have the 2 players, 2 lottery picks, no second round picks, no later first round picks. It's just these 2. But what they did in the lottery, I think, was an absolute steal. Getting Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner at the picks that they did, I think was great value for them. Both of these players kind of fell right into their laps because, as we know, Jalen Suggs was projected to go at number 4 to the Toronto Raptors. They end up passing on him, and even Franz Wagner, people had him even higher. They had potentially the Magic picking him at number 5 was really the highest draft grade that people had for him. Even 6 OKC could have taken him, and then leading up to the draft, a lot of people had Golden State at number 7 taking him there. So he kind of fell down to number 8 to them as well. So both of these players falling, and I think that it was really good value for the Magic to be able to get them where they did. If I am the Magic, I am sending a thank you card to Masai Ujiri for passing on Jalen Suggs. I'm not going to sit here and roast the Scotty Barnes pick because like I said at the top of the video, I am a big proponent of waiting and seeing where these players are going to end up, and I think Scotty Barnes is also a really great prospect, but I loved Jalen Suggs in the draft. I think that he was one of my favorite prospects out there. I was hoping that my Warriors would have enough lottery luck to be able to jump up and get him at 4 or 5 or whatever, but it didn't end up happening, and so they get to the Magic get him on a roster that already does have a lot of guards. You can argue that they already have Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, and R.J. Hampton, so they don't need Jalen Suggs. But I think they're gonna he's a better prospect to me than any of those other 3, and I just think him falling into their lap at number 5 was just some great luck by them. Again, not getting super mad at the Raptors because they're a smart organization and they do what they feel is best. But if I'm the Magic, I am very, very happy that Toronto ends up passing on him. And then adding Franz Wagner as well, a guy I think he fits well with what they do. He's a good prospect, and he ends up falling to them at number 8, and that's just it's just the ideal spot to pick him. And I think it makes sense for them to pick him there. And then Mo Wagner also played for the Magic last year. He's a free agent right now, but if they bring him back, then you can have both Wagner brothers together with Orlando, and that's always fun to see. So I think getting both of these players at the picks that they got them at was just really good value in the lottery for them. I know that they, like I said, didn't really have any other picks. It was just these 2 players, but what they did in the lottery I thought was really, really good, and they got lucky with some of these guys falling to them, but a good draft class for the Magic. So just from a numbers perspective, the Brooklyn Nets, I think, did really well. They come out with 5 players, 5 draft picks that could potentially be on the roster next year. I'm expecting, at least 1 or 2 of these guys to be on 2-way contracts. Maybe a couple of them don't make the roster. But ultimately adding 5 rookies next year on a team that, definitely needs some youth, they need some size, they need some cheap players given how much they're paying for their big 3, and I think all of these guys could end up being potential steals for them. I really love the Cameron Thomas pick, first of all. Pick number 27, a lot of people had him way higher on the big boards, potentially mid-first round talent for Cameron Thomas, and he slips all the way to 27. I love that value for them there. He's a guy who can really score the ball at the guard position. They traded away Landry Shamet. He can just step right in and fill that role, right, immediately for them. Can fill that Landry Shamet role, a couple years younger, potentially a higher ceiling for him. So really like the Cameron Thomas pick. Day'Ron Sharpe was a guy who was linked to them, in mocks all throughout the draft process, and at number 29, adding a guy with that size and that ability, I think is a great fit. Him and Nick Claxton can take the center minutes for next year. I don't know how much he'll play in his rookie season, but if he ends up panning out, he could potentially be, a good option at that big man position for them. Him and Nick Claxton there splitting minutes. So I like that pick as well for them. And then these other guys, I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about Kessler Edwards, Marcus Zagorowski, or Raekwon Gray. I think all those are sort of, high upside potential picks with the opportunity to maybe contribute early. The Nets, like I said, they need just players. They need cheap guys on their roster that they can go to in a pinch. And I think all these guys could potentially step up and contribute right away. But these are all, they're mid to late second round picks. If it doesn't pan out, it's definitely not the end of the world. And for Brooklyn, I think that's just really what they needed to be going for in this draft, and adding 5 players that could potentially make your roster next season on really cheap money, I think is just a really good idea. Specifically what puts them here is just because I felt like they nailed Cameron Thomas and Day'Ron Sharpe at the end of the first round there. I love both of those picks for them, and then just adding these 3 swings in the second round, all of that adds up to make this Nets draft class a really, really nice one. And last but definitely not least, here I have the Houston Rockets, and I loved what they did here. I think that they nailed all of this. 4 first-round picks, adding 4 first-round picks to a roster that was headlined by Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood last season, I think is definitely a good thing. Obviously trading, in the post-James Harden era, the Rockets have entered a full-on rebuild here, and they have really jump-started this one well, I think. This is their first draft, without James Harden on the team. And adding these 4 young players to this roster, I think was really, really good value. Getting Jalen Green at number 2, some people are going to argue that they could have taken Evan Mobley. Maybe they should have taken Evan Mobley, I don't know. But Jalen Green's also a really good prospect. I have no problems with them selecting him there as well. Getting a scoring guard, a guy who is a bona fide scorer, he can really fill it up. Would not be surprised to see him make the All-Star team, relatively early in his career, just given the points that he can put up in a hurry. And he's clearly one of the most talented scorers, young prospects that we have seen in a long time. Alperen Şengün and Usman Garuba, I'm going to lump them together there. Getting both of those guys in the mid to late first round is, I think, good value, and the Rockets is, I think, the perfect scenario for both of these guys. The Rockets can offer you, a team to just, you can afford to make mistakes, you can afford to develop, and you can afford to, not be super great right away and still getting those minutes and that experience in order to continue improving as an NBA player. And I think both Şengün and Garuba, foreign big men who are a little bit raw in terms of offensive skill, but Garuba has a really high ceiling defensively. Şengün is a little bit undersized to play the center position long term, but he is a great passer, and so I think both of those guys have easily identifiable skills that can impact the NBA game right away. And Houston is the great place for them to be able to afford to make mistakes early on and develop the things that they're lacking in their game. So I like both of those picks. I think it's a great fit for both of them. And then Josh Christopher as well, you can kind of lump him in, a guy who's a more raw prospect, needs a little bit of time to develop, but is also a good scorer. He was really good scoring the basketball in college, and he can take some time to develop with Houston, and I think, he fits well with having some size on the wing. He fits well with this roster as well. So I think all 4 of these guys are good fits. I think all 4 of them are in an ideal situation in Houston, giving them some time to develop and make mistakes and play through them. So just an all-around great draft class by the Rockets, and they're continuing to build out a pretty solid young core after the James Harden era. let's do a rapid fire of some of my other favorite picks from tonight. Moses Moody to the Warriors, I think he's a good fit there as a shooter. Bones Highland to the Denver Nuggets, I think makes sense with Jamal Murray going to be out for most of the year. Isaiah Todd to the Wizards, I think was good value for them at the 31st overall pick. Ayo Dosunmu to the Chicago Bulls, they need a guard. He gets to go play at home, he's from Chicago. I think that's a good fit there for them. They didn't have a pick in the first round, but getting him in the second was a good idea. Jared Butler, the Jazz end up trading down, get the guy they wanted all along. I think he's a good fit with what they do. We have Greg Brown to the Portland Trailblazers. I think makes sense. He's a developmental prospect, but they needed another big guy, and they end up trading to make that pick. I think that makes sense for in the mid-second round for Greg Brown. Sharif Cooper to the Atlanta Hawks. He slid a long way, but the Hawks add him. I think that's a great fit. They needed a backup guard, and they got one. Luka Garza to the Pistons. This is a funny one. College player of the year. People think that his skills might not translate super well to the NBA, but ultimately gambling on a guy who clearly has a ton of offensive skill, I think makes sense late in the second round, and the Pistons are a good team for him to go to. Speaking of the Pistons, I also will give an honorable mention to them as well as the New York Knicks as two of my other favorite draft classes. I won't go in depth on each of them, but I think that both of those teams did well, adding a good amount of young talent to the roster. The Knicks, made a couple of questionable trades, but ultimately still make it out with a couple of young prospects. And then the Detroit Pistons, obviously getting Cade Cunningham number one is a no-brainer, and he's great as well. And then they added some other talent at points throughout the draft. So Pistons and the Knicks get an honorable mention, as well as these other 5 teams that I've already talked about. And those are some of my other favorite picks from tonight's draft. But with all that out of the way, I think that is all I have for today's video. So thank you for watching. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the NBA draft. What were your favorite picks? What were your favorite teams? Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you are not subscribed already, please consider doing so. It would really help me out a lot. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.